Today our topic is angle pair relationships. Our essential question, how can I label angles and their relationships? Complementary angles, two angles that sum to 90 degrees. Sum is add, so they add to 90 degrees. Supplementary angles, two angles that sum to 180 degrees. Adjacent angles, two angles that share a common side and vertex. Find the missing angle measure. Complementary angles, adjacent. They share a same side, so they're sharing the side and the vertex. These two angles, they're complementary, which means they sum to 90. So if this one is 30, this one would have to be 60 to make 90. Non-adjacent angles would be angles that don't share a side or a vertex, so they're separate, but they're still complementary, which means they still sum to 90 degrees. This one's 35. This one would need to be 55 degrees in order to make 90 degrees. Supplementary angles, if it's supplementary, that means they sum to 180. If they're adjacent, that means they share a side and a vertex. This one is 130 degrees, which means this one would have to be 50 degrees to make it to 180. We have our non-adjacent pair of supplementary angles. They don't share a side or vertex, but they do still add to 180. This is 70 degrees, so this angle right here would be 110 degrees to add up to 180. Linear pair. Two adjacent angles whose non-common sides are opposite rays. So, two adjacent angles. These are adjacent. This side is the common side, so their non-common side right here makes a straight line. That's what it means for opposite rays. It makes a nice straight line. Angles in a linear pair are supplementary. They will add to 180. Vertical angles. Two angles whose sides form two pairs of opposite rays. So we have one opposite ray here and one pair of opposite rays there. So two pairs of opposite rays. So it's basically two straight lines intersecting. Vertical angles would be angles 1 and angles 3. And then angles 2 and angles 4. Identify angle pairs. Identify all the linear pairs and all the vertical angles in the figure. So for linear pairs, we're looking for a straight line, which we have right here. On the bottom half of the straight line, we have two adjacent angles that make up this straight line, angle 4 and angle 5. So they are a linear pair. They two angles that make up a straight line. So angle 4 and angle 5. For vertical angles, we're looking for two lines that crisscross like this. However, if we look at our diagram, we don't really see two lines that crisscross. If this line extended down below, then we would have a linear pair. Or if this green line extended up above, we could have, we could have a pair of vertical angles, but we don't. So in this case, there are no vertical angles. Find the value of x, then find the measure of angle 1 and the measure of angle 2. This is a linear pair. It's a straight line. Two angles that make up a straight line. So we know about a linear pair that they sum to 180. So we know angle 1 and angle 2 sum to 180. So 7x minus 3 plus 12x minus 7 equal 180. Solve this equation. Add your like terms. We have 12x plus 7x is 19x. Negative 3 plus negative 7 would be plus negative 10 equals 180. Undo the negative 10 with a positive 10. We get 19x equals 190. Divide both sides by 19 to get x by itself, and we get x equals 10. Now that we know x, we can find the measure of angle 1 and the measure of angle 2. Measure of angle 1, plug 10 in for x, and we get 70 minus 3, which is equal to 67 degrees. For the measure of angle 2, we can plug 10 in for x. We get 120 minus 7, which would be 113 degrees. Check, make sure it is 113 plus 67, 180. Yes, it is. They need to be 180 because it is a linear pair. Last example for you, find the values of x and y. Once we find the values of x and y, then we can solve for the measure of angle 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, if we look, we have 8x plus 26 and 3x here. Those both have an x in them, and if we look, we have a straight line, two adjacent angles that make up that straight line, which means this is a linear pair, which means 3 and 4 have to sum to 180. So we can take the measures of the angles, 3x plus 8x plus 26, and know that that's going to equal 180. Solve that equation. Add the like terms. Undo the plus 26 on both sides with a minus 26. We get 11x equals 154. Divide both sides by 11. We get x equals 14. All right, now that we know x equals 14, we can put that up here. We can solve for the measures of angles 3 and angles 4. We solve for the measure of angle 3. We put 14 in for x. 8 times 14 plus 26 is 138. So we can put that over here in the measure of angle 3, 138 degrees. Do the same thing for measure of angle 4. We do 3 times 14, and we get 42. So the measure of angle 4 is 42 degrees. All right. Now, we need to solve for the measure of angle 1 by finding out what y is equal to. If we look, we do have another vertical, we have another straight line, which is going to make another linear pair, but this time with 1 and 4. You see that they make that straight line, 1 and 4 do. So we know that angles 1 and angles 4 need to sum to 180 as well. So we can take the measurement of angle 1, which is 5y plus 38, add it to the measure of angle 4, which we now know is 42 degrees, and that's going to equal 180. Solve this equation, add your like terms, that's 80 minus 80 on both sides, we get 5y equals 100. Divide both sides by 5, we get y equals 20. Now that we know what y equals, we can solve for the measure of angle 1 by substituting 20 in for y. So we have 5 times 20 plus 38. Solve that, we get 138 degrees for the measure of angle 1. Now if we look, angles 1 and angles 3 have the same measure, which if you can follow the pattern, that means angles 2 and angles 4 are going to have the same measure as well. So that brings us to state that if we have a pair of vertical angles, so two lines that crisscross, the vertical angles are congruent. So angles 1 and 3 are congruent, and angles 2 and 4 are congruent. This is going to be very important, and you are going to use this a lot coming up here throughout the year in geometry, so make sure you get that down. Vertical angles are congruent. That's all the notes that I have for you today. Thank you for watching this video, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel.